Hi everybody. So today's video, I wanted to talk about the topic of my training for the last year. As many of you know, I basically decided last March, of course, that it was not safe to go to the gym anymore. I decided that I was going to have to make a big mental shift in terms of the kind of training that I was doing in order to ensure that I could continue to hit a lot of my goals in terms of building muscle mass, in terms of getting stronger and so on, while of course not going to the gym, not having access to a squat rack, not having access to a barbell. Obviously, I am more used to powerlifting, bodybuilding style training. I decided that I was going to have to make the shift over to a more calisthenic, gymnastics style focused training. And that involved quite a lot of changes, and I am going to talk about exactly what the results were. So the first thing is that I have been doing daily workouts for a very long time. Initially, the idea of these daily workouts was that it was going to be a short, small workout that would just kind of establish a baseline level of fitness that I would never go below. And initially, the idea of this, again, was just that it was going to be a short thing. I would do 10 push-ups, 10 squats a day, along with some stretching and some other stuff. And that's just kind of like, okay, this is a baseline. And of course, the actual meat of the workouts was provided by sort of the serious workouts that I did going to the gym. Now, what has happened is that naturally that has grown a lot over time in terms of scope. Basically, when you are doing the same thing over and over, you're obviously not going to continue seeing results because with diminishing returns, you have to put in a greater and greater stimulus of work in order to continue getting results. As a result, even when you are sort of taking things very slowly and adding something like, okay, you know, I was doing 10 squats every day last week and this week I'm doing 11 squats every day, even just 1 rep a week starts to add up pretty significantly. Those workouts start to get longer and longer. It's to take multiple sets to do some of these and so on. And so what ended up happening was that ended up growing. There was also the fact that I just started adding in a lot more exercises that I could do at home to cover a lot of major bases. So that includes other exercises like pull-ups, deadlifts, pike push-ups for shoulders, lateral raises, bicep curls, band pull-aparts, and so on. And so as a result, the workouts grew pretty significantly in terms of the time commitment. And that meant that they started to become something more of a serious workout and less of just a daily baseline practice. At this point, I am now doing over 150 squats and push-ups each day, as well as about 75 pull-ups, and of course everything else. And that means that it takes a decent chunk of time. So that has kind of shifted to become more of a standard daily workout. And then in addition to that, what I am doing is 4 times a week, I am doing harder workouts on top of that. So these harder workouts each week are generally focused on mastering new skills or practicing harder versions of the exercises, harder variations than what I do normally in the day-to-day workouts. So for example, that might include things like 1-arm push-ups, 1-arm pull-ups, pistol squats, core work, practicing some of the gymnastics and calisthenics movements that I've never gotten any good at before, just trying to develop strength in those movements. I'll say that I haven't mastered a lot of these moves yet, but I've made really awesome progress in a lot of them. I'm able to do the dragon flag, I'm able to do the pistol squat, things that I never thought I would be able to do back when I was much heavier, back when I was a bodybuilder and powerlifter, simply because I was like, you know, I'll never have the time to really focus on these or develop them, and now I do, and I have. I've also gotten to the point where I am able to do a semi-passable front lever for a few seconds, and that's pretty awesome too, because that excites me, meaning that I will probably be able to get the front lever down before too long as well. Of course, another important factor is cardio. It used to be that when I went to the gym 4 times a week, I got in my cardio naturally because the gym is about a 15-minute walk away, and that means that I would get about a 30-minute walk going there and back in addition to the workouts that I was doing, again, 4 days a week, and that was awesome. However, during lockdown, I've gotten really into just walking for cardio and going for a walk in the neighborhood. My neighborhood is a bit hilly, so you know it's a pretty decent stimulus. It does actually get my heart rate up pretty decently. And as a result, I am able to really enjoy that and kind of treat it as a very meditative practice early in the mornings where it's just a crucial part of my morning routine. And it really gets me excited to wake up in the morning, go for a walk, fiddle around on my phone, maybe listen to some podcasts, answer some emails, whatever the case is. But it's kind of a very nice, relaxing phase for about 30 to 45 minutes every morning. And of course, again, I just go for a quick walk in my neighborhood. We also were able to get a hold of a rowing machine. So if there's ever something where it happens that for some reason I'm not able to get in my morning walk, maybe I've got a really busy day, maybe, you know, things have just come up, whatever the case is, the rower makes a really awesome supplement to that where basically in the evening I can sit down and do 10, 15, 20 minutes of rowing, and that generally makes up for it. So it's good to have that backup for when not feeling my best in the mornings. So of course, what are the results of this shift? So the first and most obvious change is my weight. Basically, just before lockdown started happening, I was in the middle of a bulk and I was gaining weight, and I was basically around 90 kilos, and I was a little bit fluffy, a little bit higher body fat percentage. I didn't really care. Coming from someone who just generally trains for strength and muscle, I hadn't really done a serious cut in a long time because I just hadn't, needed to. It hadn't really been a part of my goals. And I actually made a video about how basically I had no intention of ever cutting weight. And then, surprise, surprise, lockdown happened. I realized that really shifted my priorities in ways that I hadn't expected. When you're training for calisthenics and gymnastics, of course, the resistance that you're using in a lot of these movements is simply your body weight. And that means that a lot of these movements have a bit of a bias where they're a bit easier to learn and master when you have a slightly lighter body weight, when you're a bit leaner. And I also just kind of suspected that I wouldn't be able to maintain sort of the same level of muscle mass that I had with just body weight home workouts. So I figured, okay, it makes sense to cut down weight a little bit, get a bit leaner, get to a point where I look a bit better, and also just I'm able to sort of maintain at a nice level. So I cut down from 90 kilos to 75 kilos, pretty significant cut over a few months. And then after that, I basically just kind of relaxed a little bit, just went back to sort of eating intuitively, and now I'm back up to about 80 kilos. So I've regained a little bit. I'm considering possibly cutting a bit more in the future, getting leaner, getting below 10% body fat again. But for the time being, don't really need to. It's not really holding me back. And it feels good to be a bit leaner and to look a bit better. Initially, I was worried that I was going to lose a lot more muscle in the process, but I really did maintain basically all of it. I did lose a bit, of course, because that's a natural part of cutting weight, but I'm really surprised by how well it worked. I'm really surprised by basically just how well I was able to maintain muscle mass shifting over to bodyweight workouts when I was so used to, for example, just bench pressing heavy, squatting heavy, deadlifting heavy, basically, again, constantly. And my body's so used to it over years and years of training. In fact, I've generally seen that I've put on a bit more muscle mass over the course of the last year just from continuing to train. I've seen that especially a lot of it has happened in sort of the arms, the shoulders, the upper back, especially in part because I'm doing a lot more pull-ups, a lot more back work than I used to do. And sort of the big concern that I had was basically that I would not be able to build lower body mass, again, because I was just so used to squatting and deadlifting heavy all the time. I will say that basically I am able to squat, and of course I've got 2 50-pound dumbbells. That adds a bit of weight, but it's not nearly as challenging, so you have to rely a lot more on higher reps, more endurance, and so on. And I would say that sort of the biggest thing that suffered a little bit is just the glutes, lower back, hamstrings, and that's because I just do not have anywhere near the capacity to deadlift or do any kind of hip work anywhere near as heavy as I used to. However, I was very lucky to discover a really cool piece of equipment, which is called a flywheel box. It's basically something I hadn't heard of until very recently. I don't think anybody else has heard of them either, but essentially it's a small platform box and it has a flywheel built into it, sort of the same technology that you see in a rowing machine, but a lot heavier. That means also that sort of the harder you pull on it, the more resistance it provides, because the resistance is partly generated by the spinning of the wheel and sort of resisting the energy that you've put into it on each rep on the way back down. This makes it kind of cool, and it's a really useful tool for doing squats and deadlifts. I was able to pick one up. It's been sort of a really crucial piece of equipment at home. It doesn't take up much space, and it enables me to do a lot of the lower body exercises with a decent amount of weight, compared to, again, just having a pair of 50-pound dumbbells and nothing else. So that has been a really crucial piece of equipment in terms of building and maintaining muscle mass in the lower body. So what did I learn in the process? Obviously, the first thing I learned is that you don't really have to be training super heavy to build a good physique. This is obviously something I always knew. You can look at any number of calisthenics, gymnastics athletes out there who look great, build a ton of muscle and so on. And so it's really not impossible. While I think that maybe in some cases it may be suboptimal, it's certainly not impossible to build and maintain a lot of muscle mass with body weight exercises. And this is definitely a lesson that I internalized a lot more this year, actually living through it and seeing it with my own eyes and so on. It also is proof that you can get decent results training pretty far from failure. Basically, when you are training and you're doing bodybuilding type work, and say you're doing 12 reps at a weight that you can handle for about 12 reps, you're kind of wondering how far away can you train from failure and still get decent results. So if you're doing 11 reps when your max is 12, is that enough? If you're doing 10 reps when your max is 12, is that enough? What about, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4? At what point does it become too easy and you start to have your results suffer as a result of training really far from failure? Well, I would say that especially when it comes to higher rep endurance work, like you typically see in body weight training, I'm able to train pretty far from failure because, of course, I'm not pushing it, grinding out, 100 rep sets that I could be doing. Instead, I'm training with something like 30, 40, 50, 60 reps at a time to make it a lot more manageable and to make it so that the sets are not lasting forever. So that's another thing where, again, I knew that, science tells us that, but it was nice to live through it. It was nice to see the proof of it firsthand with my own eyes. I would also say that these lighter workouts are generally a little bit easier on the recovery. Definitely there are plenty of ways that you can get super, super sore, but I would say that I don't get super sore the same way that I used to when I was going to the gym. That's not to say, of course, again, that it isn't cause any soreness at all, but in general, I would say that the lighter workouts, higher endurance, higher reps are a little bit easier on the recovery. And that also just helps because it means that I can train a lot more frequently, again, with my daily workouts and still see awesome results and still be able to hit it and still be fresh every single day and not feel like I'm super exhausted like I used to be when I would say go to the gym, do some really heavy deadlifting, knock myself on my ass for a couple of days. Another thing that I really learned and internalized is that basically this kind of training is not a joke. I certainly used to have this sort of mentality when I was younger and I was maybe a little bit more foolhardy, where I was a powerlifter, I was a bodybuilder, I was really strong, I was in great shape. And what I always thought was, it's not that hard to master a lot of these movements. It's something where you just have to spend a couple weeks, a couple months, whatever, practicing the movement, getting the skill down, getting the form down just right, and then it's pretty easy. And I always sort of told myself that the reason that I had never gotten any good at any of these movements was, of course, simply because I didn't have the time or the energy or the interest to do so. Now, of course, living through a year of that training, certainly I've mastered some new movements. Certainly there's a lot more that are still very hard and that I am really struggling with. They're not a joke at all. This is really a pretty serious discipline. And of course, I look at some of the guys that I see who are way further along in this journey than me, who can do a lot of really cool movements. And I'm like, dang, that's really impressive. I really understand how impressive it is now compared to, again, the way that I used to think. So that is it for today's video. I'm probably going to do another video similar to this one where I just kind of talk over exactly what that training looks like, doing some videos, just walking you through my workouts. So of course, if you're interested, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, tell me what you want to see in future videos. Stick around. Of course, I will come up with that later. All right, have a good week and talk to you later.